Imagine you're a scientist, a university student studying in the sciences, or someone who's graduated with a full PhD in his field. Like everyone else, you've been taught everything you need to know about evolution, and shown all the evidence that proves this incredible theory. Heck, you were even shown how evolutionary theory relates to your field. After all, evolutionary theory applies to all scientific fields, doesn't it? But then imagine that, through your own research and studies, you find out that all of the facts you were taught about evolution suddenly weren't so factual anymore. How would you react? How would you feel to have your worldview shaken to its core as everything you thought you knew crumbled before your eyes? I know. Some of you watching this are already thinking, well, that's just not possible. Evolution is a fact. Well, in this documentary, we are going to interview 6 men, all trained in the sciences, who would have said that very same thing. Some of them were, in fact, even outspoken atheists who championed evolution. Yet all of them, usually because of their own research, all wound up becoming scientific heretics. Members of the clan that did not just doubt Darwinian evolution, but came to the conclusion that the Earth was young and that the biblical account of creation was correct. Why? Again, I can already hear some express their shock. How could anyone possibly come to such a conclusion? How could they be so ignorant of the facts? But wait, these men were taught the same things you were. In fact, each of them regarded those who questioned evolution with disdain, bewilderment, and even condescending mockery. It was news to Doug that there was people who doubted Darwin.
I didn't think that there was anybody that actually doubted evolution.
Alan regarded such people as simply religious, believing in blind faith.
These people who may have been like pure six-day creationists, I regarded them as Bible thumpers. You know, the people went to churches, and outside the churches they hung a sign, Jesus saves.
Rick, who graduated from university as a completely deaf student, also regarded such naysayers as simply religious.
Some Bible school classes, they gave me Bible facts and stories like Noah and the Ark, Joshua marching around Jericho, that kind of stuff. They were only stories though.
Tom regarded them as religious, but had less than politically correct words for such people.
Well, I called them kooks at the time.
Jerry was a militant atheist who didn't mince his words.
And I felt people who were theists were ignorant, were stupid. I felt enlightened.
David definitely felt Darwin doubters just simply didn't know the facts.
I felt strongly superior. I felt my scientific background and education was supportive of my position, that I was making sense. And
they were to be sort of avoided. They were obnoxious. They were irritating.
And I would think that they were crazy. I mean, didn't they know that organisms came about by chance natural processes? Didn't they know that science had already disproven God?
People who did not accept our worldview were fools, were stupid, were ignorant, because I believed the science was on our side and the science was not on their side, and therefore I felt that they were uninformed, which is widely held among both the atheists that I associate with as well as the Darwinists or evolutionists.
It's people you couldn't discuss things with, and I looked down on them.
When I heard of creationists, I really thought that they were really off their rockers.
they were the ones who were walking in the dark and making up excuses and listening to fairy tales.
Ironically, now having become Darwin doubters themselves, these men have now become the target of this same attitude and behavior. During the pre-release of this documentary, many comments were made just in response to the movie trailer. I'm wagering that nowhere in this video will even the vaguest reference be made to said evidence. Yep. This is hilarious. The people in the video have no idea how evolution happens, yet they feel qualified to reject it in favor of some sort of unexplainable magical creation. What a complete crock of expletive deleted. Evolution isn't random. That is a fundamental fact about evolutionary theory that these people just don't understand. And if they don't understand the theory, how can they reject it? Horrible video, just horrible. Persuaded by what evidence? As Aaron Ross says, there has never been a single verifiably accurate argument of evidence indicative of miraculous creation over biological evolution or any other avenue of actual science, not one, period. Have these guys even heard of comparative genomics? Are they aware that they share thousands of pseudogenes, ERVs, and ALU elements in the same positions in their genomes as other species? There is no chance of this being true without common descent. My personal favorite. How can they be taken seriously? Just look at their offices. No antique bookcases or mansions. Lord help me. I don't think these guys are scientists at all. Certainly not biologists or anything close to that. Evolution is considered a fact today, and it has already become applied science in some fields. If you were to be persuaded by the evidence, i.e. how every tree from every field that can even be semi-related to biology is completely identical, you would know that evolution is a fact. I still have yet to hear anyone explain ERVs without the use of common descent or the designer just made it that way, and that's only one small, albeit very specific, facet. Okay, so you found a handful of people you describe as scientists who say they used to accept evolution and now reject its lies. Big deal. Lots of people believe, expletive deleted, because of their religious biases in the teeth of all the evidence. Somehow I doubt I will find the film's evidence, that the trailer never refers to, at all persuasive. More likely it'll be more Kent Hovind-style hucksterism, stupidity, credulity, and out-and-out fraud. After one YouTube viewer went into a long, erroneous tirade about Hitler having Christian and creationist leanings, another YouTube viewer then posted, "Knudsen, dang, you just wrecked that guy. He couldn't even answer. But he leaves his dishonest video up. What a," expletive deleted, "scumbag." And wazooloo, that's me, "You call yourself a Christian? Is this truly how Christians are supposed to act? You should be," expletive deleted, "ashamed of yourself. Dishonest creep, if you had any integrity, personally or intellectually, you wouldn't leave misleading rubbish like this online. What if an impressionable kid finds this and actually believes this?" Expletive deleted. And remember, these were the comments left just regarding the promotional trailer for this documentary. Imagine what they will say about the documentary. While I certainly understand why many educated people would have a knee-jerk reaction to the premise of this documentary, I would encourage you to follow through and listen carefully to what these men have to say, remembering that they too were of evolutionary persuasion. I mean, think about it. If my interviewees are really as incompetent and stupid as the critics make them out to be, then their stupidity and incompetence should be obvious to you, the viewer, by the end of this video. So I'll let you be the judge. Listen carefully, as I think you too will be persuaded by the evidence. Six men, all trained in the sciences.
Okay, my name is Douglas Bruce Sharp. I am a computer scientist. That's what I do for a living, and I got bit by the computer bug while I was in college and doing, but my degree was in physical science, which was a whole lot of chemistry and physics and math and biology and geology is some of the things I took, which ended up with a bachelor's degree in physical science. And so that's my background, and I do computer work for the Department of Natural Resources.
As I'm David Bradbury, have a degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Michigan in 1948. Graduated, went into the pharmaceutical and industrial fields, working with the processing equipment used in most chemical reactions.
My name is Jerry Bergman, and I teach at college now. I've taught at the college level for about 35 years. I teach primarily science in the science area, although I have in the past taught in the psychology area as well as the education area. And my background includes a doctorate from Wayne State University, a master's and a bachelor's also from Wayne State. And also I have 3 master's degrees from the Medical College of Ohio, which is now the Medical School of the University of Toledo. And I also have a master's degree from Bowling Green State University.
I went to the University of Victoria and I got a university degree, an honors degree in mathematics.
Hi, I'm Rick Lanster. I was not born deaf, but I lost my hearing from spinal meningitis when I was 7 years old. So I knew how to speak, how to read, and I had that real benefit so that I didn't need to go to a deaf school. But being deaf, it causes a lot of problems, and I needed to learn how to lip read, but I was able to lip read well, so I stayed at the public schools and was able to finish my high school education without having an interpreter. Then I went to Penn State and majored in medical technology.
My name is Tom Hennigan. I have an associate's degree in forest technology and a bachelor's degree in natural resources management and 2 master's degrees, one in education and one in ecology.
Of course, all 6 of them believed evolution. And while Tom was raised in a Catholic home, he rebelled against religion and went on to live a godless life. David was raised as a nominal Christian, but was taught evolution, believed it, and rejected the Christian faith. Rick, Alan, and Doug were raised in Christian homes, and while they never concluded there was no God, they just believed the evolution they were taught, and either didn't think about God or, frankly, considered God irrelevant. Jerry was raised a convinced atheist. As a result, each has a unique testimony and unique lessons to be learned from each one. Let's start with Doug, whose childhood drive for knowledge and science led him down an interesting path.
I grew up in church, and so I grew up with a Christian background, and my parents were pretty much modeling a Christian life, and so I did grow up with that, and yet for me that wasn't my primary focus in life. I didn't really give church very much of a thought, and I didn't really give the creation evolution question very much of a thought. I sort of didn't know that there was a problem with what I had in one half of my mind, which is my scientific mind, and that was my primary interest and primary focus, was that I was just interested in everything, interested in science. And and the thing that caught my attention was the Miller-Urey experiment, and I thought that was very interesting, and that life could have actually formed by a process, a chemical process in primordial soup, and I thought that was actually quite interesting. What I was looking at with the Miller-Urey experiment was, I had created I had built a Van de Graaff generator in my basement, and it stood about 5 feet tall and had a big dome on the top, and it would shoot off 6-foot long sparks. It was a pretty impressive piece of equipment, and I was really having a lot of fun with that, and I entered it in a science fair. And the fellow who actually won the science fair had done the Miller-Urey experiment, had set up the apparatus and everything, and was producing the amino acids out of a primordial atmosphere of methane, ammonia, and hydrogen gas.
The Miller-Urey experiment was a very famous experiment carried out in the 1950s. It was an attempt to explain the origin of life by natural processes. A closed circuit of glass tubes contained water, ammonia, hydrogen, and methane. The water was boiled, which circulated the water as steam, mixing with the gases and traveling through a spark chamber, after which the water was cooled and condensed. All of this was to simulate the world as it allegedly was before the first life. The sparks were to simulate lightning. A trap collected any molecules that were found. Well, after a few days of operation, sure enough, amino acids were produced. Amino acids are the building blocks of life. Amino acids join together to form proteins. The press of the day reported on the experiment with much fanfare, stating that scientists had created life in the lab. Well, calling a very small number of amino acids life is like calling a pile of bricks the Empire State Building. Doug wanted to take the Miller-Urey experiment to the next level. He wanted to show how nature could then take these amino acids and join them together to make proteins. Basically, he wanted to show how nature could take that pile of bricks and start to assemble the Empire State Building all on its own.
So what I reasoned was that if you are actually producing the components of life in the test tube, then the next step is to get them to combine together to form proteins, and that would be the next logical step in how life could have come about through evolution. And so I did not actually, at that point in my life I was double-minded. I had one compartment in my mind that was went to church, and the other compartment in my mind that was the scientific, and there seemed to be no problem in those two different worlds trying to reconcile them, until I came up against scientific evidence that I found as I was doing my experiments of how impossible the process is to actually produce the proteins, because the conditions that you needed to produce the amino acids actually were different than the conditions that you would need to actually produce the conditions that would cause them to join together to produce peptide bond, which is what you have to do is you have to take a water molecule out of it. You have the OH out of the hydroxyl bond, part of the amino acid. You take that out, and then you take the hydrogen from the amine part, and they combine together to form the peptide bond. And so an environment that had water vapor in it, which was part of the Miller-Urey experiment that produced the components of life, the amino acids, would have been detrimental to the trying to have them combine to form the peptide bond. So that was one problem I encountered.
Let me translate this for you. What Doug found out was that water was needed in order to make amino acids, as shown in the Miller-Urey experiment. But to join amino acids together to form proteins, you have to remove water, so the processes that make amino acids do not permit the formation of proteins. He also later found out that in order to make things like DNA nucleotides, the rungs on the DNA ladder, You need materials like formaldehyde. But if there's any formaldehyde in the Miller-Urey experiment, you ruin the experiment and you do not produce amino acids. You need amino acids and proteins and DNA to make life. We could probably rhyme off dozens of more reasons why natural processes cannot produce the first life, but you get the point.
What I found also was that amino acids that were produced by the Miller-Urey experiment were in stereoisomers. They were of mirror images of each other, where you have a left-handed and a right-handed configuration of both of them. And those configurations were produced in equal mixtures in the Miller-Urey experiment, and then actually any other synthesis of amino acids that are conducted, you get equal combinations of both. And actually, if you have an isolated left-handed part, they racemize, which means that they tend to go towards producing equal mixtures of both. And so, but the problem is that life only uses the left-handed kind. And there needs to be some mechanism to purify the left-handed kind of amino acids in order to produce the proteins. And I've seen actually a symposium, a big thick book at MSU. Maybe you and I can look it up while we're out at MSU, which had all these attempts by biochemists to isolate the left-handed amino acid in order to produce life, and they all met with failure. And it was probably the most frustrated symposium I've ever taken a look at, because it was all these different people trying to produce these results that and they all met in puzzlement and failure, and trying to figure out, well, how do we actually accomplish this? And so what this indicated to me, and it caused me to really start thinking about the creation evolution issue. And I said, this is, the idea that life could have come about by chance is absolutely nonsense. At that time, I was making these conclusions. I was relaying these frustrations to my counselor at Michigan State University, and trying to figure out, well, do I really want to stay in the chemistry major? And she mentioned to me Dr. John N. Moore, who was a professor at Michigan State, and he taught natural science. He actually team taught natural science with an evolutionist, but Dr. Moore was a creationist, and I didn't know such animals existed. But he was the managing editor at the time of the Creation Research Society Quarterly. And so I looked him up and got to know him and talked to him about my ideas. And actually what he did was to set up with my academic advisor a independent study for me to further study the Miller-Urey experiment and the abiogenesis question and all these different things to detail out what. And he gave me an article which was written at the time. This was 1969 or something like that, where James Coppage had written this article about the impossibility of proteins forming by chance. And what he did was actually put some numbers to the left-handed amino acid dilemma. And he says that, for one protein to come about by chance with an average length protein would be one chance in 10 to the 123rd power, which is got 123 zeros after it.
Let's examine what Doug's talking about here. You need 20 amino acids for life. There's actually more than 20, but there's a basic group of 20 amino acids needed. The example Dr. Coppage gave Doug was actually for a very small protein. probably around 95 amino acids long. The average protein produced in a human is probably around the 500 to 600 mark. But some proteins have been found almost 27,000 amino acids long. Essentially, only one sequence is the correct sequence. You have to select the correct amino and add it to the sequence in the right order. Now, if you join two amino acids together, and you have a choice of 20 of them, then you can get 400 different combinations, 20 to the power of 2. 3 amino acids in a row yields 8,000 different possible combinations. 4 amino acids will have 160,000 different combinations. And don't forget, only one combination is the correct combination. So you can start to see that the number of possible combinations gets really big really fast. So now, joining together 95 amino acids to make a small protein chain, you can have on the order of 10 to the power of 123 different combinations. Written out, that's a really big honking number. The most widely accepted age of the universe among old universe advocates is around the 13.5 billion year mark. That works out to about 425 quintillion 736 trillion seconds. Yeah, give or take a few seconds. So we only have 425 quadrillion 736 trillion seconds to try out all 10 to the power of 123 different combinations to assemble our protein without any guidance. So, dividing 425 quintillion 736 trillion into 10 to the power of 123, you get 2.3488 times 10 to the power of 106. Written out, this is how many different combinations of amino acids you have to try every second for 13.5 billion years to randomly assemble one short protein. Needless to say, this is flat out impossible. What non-intelligent process is going to try all of those amino acids? Attempting to blame this genetic engineering on alleged aliens from outer space doesn't solve the problem either. It only brings up the problem, where did the aliens come from?
I really didn't realize how big a number that was, and when I was talking, when I was looking at it, I also read some additional articles later that increased that the odds of that ever happening to 10 to the 40,000th power, which is what Fred Hoyle came up with. You know, and you know, the whole idea of a tornado forming an airplane in a junkyard comes to mind as the process that was trying to create life. The odds against that happening is the same thing as what it is with trying to put together proteins, and so it's a non-equilibrium state that we're trying to create when you're trying to create life. It's something that's so totally out of the ordinary for it to happen by chance that you have to come to the conclusion that there is a creator God. And that's where it helped me to reconcile the two halves of my brain that was sort of isolated. You know, he had one half that was in church, the other half that was, you know, the scientific mind. And I didn't realize I had a conflict until I was doing these, conducting these experiments. I really didn't have a time where I was, you know, I was playing around with things like the gap theory and theistic evolution, the day-age theory, and I was just trying to reconcile those things in my mind. I didn't think there was actually a problem with an old Earth or anything like that, and that was before I met Dr. Moore, where he just showed me some of these places geologically that were not in the order that evolution expected.
Doug is referring to formations geologists claim are overthrusts. Red Rock Canyon and Valley of Fire are only two of hundreds of these in North America alone. We've all seen the nice drawings of the hypothetical geologic column with the older rock layers on the bottom and the younger rock layers on top. An overthrust is where the sequence is reversed. You have evolutionarily older rocks sitting on top of younger rocks. Now, in the particular instance of Red Rock Canyon and Valley of Fire, both in Nevada, we find rock layers dated by evolutionists as Cambrian, is resting on top of red sandstone of Jurassic Age. Being in complete defiance of the geologic column, evolutionary geologists have suggested that the older rock layers somehow slid over top of the younger layers. Yet there is no evidence of this. The sliding would have heated the rock to the melting point. And this did not happen. In fact, most of the rock layers at the contact point do not even show scratch marks known as slickensides. So how was 1,000 feet of rock supposed to slide over top of the other without even so much as scratching the rock? Also, the rock layers locked together like teeth on gears, showing that there was never any sliding. In similar fashion, the Empire Mountain Thrust, just south of Tucson, Arizona, we find Permian limestone on top of Cretaceous marble. Again, no slide marks, and while the Cretaceous limestones have been converted into marble by heat and pressure, the overlying rocks have seen no heat. The layers are also locked together in a gear mesh fit. Up in Canada, at the entrance to Banff National Park, we find the Yamnuska Mountain Thrust, where allegedly 600-million-year-old rock is sitting on top of 100-million-year-old rock, again with no evidence of sliding. Inside Banff, at Castle Mountain, is another reverse sequence of allegedly 400 to 600-million-year-old rock resting on top of 200-million-year-old rock. The contact is so knife-edge that it's very difficult to discern the two layers. These are only a very few of the reverse sequences of the artificial construction known as the geological column. There are hundreds of them in North America alone, and only one genuine sequence reversal is enough to topple the fictitious geologic column and the hundreds of millions of years. You can start to see why Doug said what he did.
I realized I was lied to in that area too, because I had been always taught that the geologic column was something that was really set in stone. And when you look at it, it's there are places such as in Red Rock Canyon and Valley of Fire out in the Las Vegas area, which are out of sequence. And I was seeing that if it's out of sequence, how could you actually have the physical processes form that in an evolutionary manner? It has to be a catastrophic event that would have formed those out of sequence strata. And so that sort of provided the foundation for the first book I wrote, which is called Revolution Against Evolution.
Doug realized that the whole concept of geologic time was refuted, which meant that evolution was also refuted, as evolution required many millions of years to work. But Doug's biological studies also showed that, even with many millions, even billions of years, you still could not get life. Doug was not the only one to be rather shocked at what he discovered.
At that time, I was strictly a nominal Christian. I fell away while I was in college. I believed what they were telling me about evolution, and what they told me about so many things that differed with what the Christian would have you believe on the superficial level. Only as I encountered a number of things, the most impressive in my way of thinking was when I ran into Dr. John Greeby's offer of $1,000. Dr. Greeby was the director of basic research for the Dow Chemical Company, which happened to be one of my customers at the time. Thousands of patents in his own name. He was at the time working with the citizens down in Texas on their school problems, having them then just as they're having them today. that they were attempting to put in a new textbook, and he was there as a guest speaker, apparently, along with the editors and the publishers of the book itself. And during that course of events, he offered these gentlemen $1,000 if they would come up with one bit of bona fide scientific evidence establishing evolution to be a scientific theory.
Oh, okay. So $1,000 in those days would be, what would that be now?
Oh boy, at the time, you might appreciate it, $1,000 was worth considerably more than it is today, probably $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 today, the normal rate of inflation that we've experienced in these last 30 years. And that was a lot of money to me at the time, and I was willing to, when I heard that the money had not been collected, that it was still available, that I said I was going to go out and get it myself. And he said, I wish you luck. And so I went out to my local college professors, went to the library at the University of Michigan, Michigan State, Wayne State University, and accessed as many research papers having to do with the concept of evolution that they were talking about, the origin of life, the transmutation of species, the differentials that are involved in evolution on a macro state. And I couldn't find anything that wasn't surmised as far as their conclusions were concerned. They made a lot of good scientific investigations that sounded real good as they were going, but they never had a scientific confirmation, a physical confirmation of the appearance of a new organ or a new limb or a new, the structural details might change, but they weren't evolving by the macro concepts. And so I had to say, well, so I was under the wrong impression. I felt that when they said evolution, they meant that when they said evolution was science, that they had scientific support to prove it. No, they had scientific evidence to support it, but that's a different cry by all means. No way was it.
Okay, so before this, I mean, you were obviously a convinced evolutionist. So before this, were you like a militant evolutionist, or how would you describe yourself?
Well, out of school, I was an ardent evolutionist, and I still had many Christian friends, but as I was talking with them on various occasions, it wasn't belligerent, but I would come down on them pretty heavy, challenging them for the kind of information that I was seeking, just basic scientific proof, empirical proof. When it was not forthcoming, I felt strongly superior. I felt my scientific background and education was supportive of my position, that I was making sense, and that they were the ones who were walking in the dark and making up excuses and listening to fairy tales. And as it went on, it took 3 or 4 years going through this search for evidence and not being able to find it. I was going so far as to call professors in the surrounding universities and talking to them, names that I'd heard of in the area that were supposed to be knowledgeable, and they'd frankly tell me that the science wasn't as solid as most people believed, that it was an interpretive science, a consensus of science, rather than a demonstrative aspect of science. And that was new to me. It took me, once this began to register, then I started to have a more gracious feeling towards my Christian friends, and almost wanted to go back and apologize to some of them, let them know that I was very admittive that what I thought was right was wrong, and what they were trying to tell me to consider was worth considering, if nothing else. So as I started looking into this a little bit further, and looking at some of the experiments that the Christians, that the creationists were making, or some of the surmises, some of the consensus opinion amongst the creationists, it made more sense if you look at it from a reasoned point of view. If you see now, if you take your cards and put them on the table, well, the high hand wins. And the scientists will put their cards on the table. The creationists, who are many of them equally valid in their scientific backgrounds and capabilities, they put their cards on the table, and invariably they had the winning hand. Maybe not a grand slam over a pair of deuces, but it was a significantly stronger hand. And I've found that to be true. The further I dig into this, the more certain that manifests itself.
So what evidence? What can you give me an example? You said you went to university libraries. What did you find, or did you not find?
I went to the university and drew the materials out of their reference libraries on evolution. All of the theses from the masters and PhD applicants that I could get my hands on. The Miller-Urey experiment was one that was in the highlights at the time. And you could see what they were doing, and it made sense as a slow, incremental, might be type of information, but it didn't establish anything significant for as far as evolution was concerned. Particularly nowadays, we realize how weak the evidence from Miller experiments really were, because he was making some amino acids, select few amino acids, not necessarily the right kind of amino acids, and certainly not the mixture of amino acids that was necessary if organic life was to ever develop under conditions that he was emulating.
Right.
Chirility, where you get the right-handed and left-handed amino acids, it's new to me then, and it's new to most of the folks today that are not involved in microbiology, that it's not just the amino acid that has to be present, it has to be the right kind, the right configuration, the right amount, and under the right circumstances.
Okay.
All of which are mathematically calculable, and they turn out to be infinitesimal as far as they're having the possibility of combining in that combination without external controls. And external controls means you have external guidance, which means chance is insufficient. And I came to have to accept the fact that chance doesn't really cut the mustard, and that it wouldn't be unreasonable to ponder the possibility of some external guidance or external control or some mechanism that we haven't yet developed an understanding of. And I started to ask some serious questions about evolution.
Dr. Jerry Bergman is a walking paradox. Raised not only a convinced evolutionist, but also an atheist. He has 9 university degrees, 2 of them PhDs. He's listed in Marquis Who's Who in the Midwest since 1992, Marquis Who's Who in America since 2000, Marquis Who's Who in Education since the 6th edition, Marquis Who's Who in Science and Engineering since the 8th edition, Marquis Who's Who in Medicine and Healthcare since 2005, Who's Who in Theology and Science, Who's Who in America, 47th edition. His library is listed in the Directory of Special Libraries and Information Centers. October 29th, 2009, he was appointed Research Associate at Logos Research Foundation, Santa Ana, California. And he is a member of Mensa, the International High IQ Society. His story took a number of remarkable twists and turns as he applied his methodical and tenacious researching skills to the question of origins. I asked him what it was that started his journey of questions.
I question atheism because I was involved in the atheist movement. I looked in the literature, the atheist literature, and I became very discouraged with what I found because it just was not accurate. Like, for example, the Bruno case, the Galileo case, which is well known, as well as the Spanish Inquisition, etc.
Okay, now, I know that when I read the atheist literature now, I don't know what it was like back then.